Hi, I'm Wade Hansen. I've been selling luxury real estate in Minnesota and Wisconsin for over 23 years. My entire career has been spent protecting my clients from misinformation and unethical practices by those not looking out for their best interests. This podcast will give you the raw truth about everything real estate so you can make solid, informed decisions about the biggest investment of your lifetime. This is the Raw Real Estate Podcast. Marty, thanks for being here. I appreciate your time and your insight, expertise. You're one of the guys I really respect in the industry. I know you've been around the block a few times. You've been through the good, the bad, and the ugly. So maybe just quickly just give me a little background on you and how long you've been in the industry and where you're at today.
Great. So it's probably been 30 years. I started my second year out of college. I went to St. Olaf College, and I got a degree in economics. And I had a chat shortly thereafter with a broker over at what was then Burnett Realty. And we had a chat about what to do for a career. And of course, like every 22-year-old, I said, well, I want $30,000. I want to work for 3M, and I want a car allowance. And he kind of laughed at me, and he said, well, why would you want to work at a place where you can't decide what you want to make? And I thought, well, that's interesting. And then we started talking about helping people and finding houses and how satisfying that was. Long and short of it is, fast forward 30 years later, and that's kind of been my career. As I spent 15 years at Burnett, which then became Coldwell Banker, and had a small stint with my own brokerage called Real Estate Nexus. And then I've spent the last 12 years with Keller Williams Premier, which is over in White Bear Lake.
Okay.
So that's kind of the history on that.
You're on a team now.
And I am on a team. We have 6 people, 5 agents, and 1 admin. And dynamite 2 young ladies that are really hitting it hard, that are in their early 20s. And then a lady who's up in Chisago, working the lakes area up in Chisago. And then Luke, who you've met. Luke and I kind of work the Northeast Metro, and mostly kind of the Matamidi, Stillwater area, and White Bear Lake is probably our main focus, White Bear Lake Shore.
Okay, great. Yeah, I've had the pleasure of working with Luke and your admin staff, and everybody's just a professional and a pro and great to work with. So it's
and Angela's the bomb. She runs the team, and she's probably the one you dealt with. Yeah. Or your admin.
Yep, I've
probably
got Mia,
dealt with her.
and so Mia and Angela are definitely our right arms, I think, in this industry. So,
for sure.
So yeah, we're combined, I think, over 50 years in real estate between the two of us. So that's a lot of knowledge, a lot of experience, and I think a lot of information I think we can share with the consumer. And kind of the purpose of this podcast is to share that information with the consumer and really kind of see what's behind the curtain, kind of cut through some of the BS that maybe they're seeing out there, everything from the guaranteed offers to I have a buyer for your home, letters that they receive in the mail, things like that. So today, as we sit here, it's 2022. We're entering what I'm going to say is year almost 2 of the pandemic. Mm-hmm. How has that changed not only your business, but just the consumer's experience in real estate?
I think what it's done to my business is it's devastated some aspects of my business, and I'll just kind of back up and share what I view has happened in the last 2 years. And this is my chance to take a little shot at the media. I think the media has pretty much paralyzed our 65 plus consumers. Mm-hmm. So anybody over the age of 65 right now has decided that rather than moving, they're going to age in place. They have, and I'll use my parents as an example. They'll have people come in and stretch them and help them. One of them's in their 80s, one's in their 70s, and they have people coming in to help them with yoga and different things so that they can stay in a home rather than going to a townhome or a condo. They all believe those are petri dishes of disease, and that they're not going to live if they make it into one of those places. And I think that's just changed the dynamic. So we have no inventory in the areas I work. We have a lot of people that want to get out of their 5,000-6,000 square foot homes, especially around the lake, and in areas like Matamidi and Delwood, where I focus. And it's terribly frustrating that we can't politely get them to go to their next stage of life. But I also believe that people should get, they should get to do what they want. And so that we're letting them do that. And it's just really challenging for our buyers. Our buyers can't find a house.
It's bottled up inventory for sure. That's a great point. And I think to take the media one step further, on the buy side, I think the media has created this frenzy of fear of missing out for buyers. I think the buyers are in this market of, if I don't buy now, I'm going to miss out on this wonderful opportunity to buy a house. There'll never be another opportunity like this in my lifetime. And that's created that frenzy of driving prices up and getting into bidding wars and waiving inspections and doing all these different things that I'm not necessarily an advocate of. So yeah, I totally agree with what you're saying. And just to kind of go down that path a little bit further as far as what you're seeing in buyers, I think the way the buyers are driving prices up, the way the buyers are waiving home inspections, some of the bad decisions buyers are making is going to come back to haunt them. What's your viewpoint right now on the buy side of things?
Well, those are all great points. I think the scariest one for me isn't so much that they are perhaps overpaying for the inventory that does exist. I think the bigger scare is the removal of the inspections. I think there's a lot of houses being sold that are in average repair or maybe need some work, and the buyers are walking into it somewhat blind because they are desperate to find homes. And I appreciate now the government's talking about 3 or 4 adjustments to the interest rates. If that happens, I think that puts additional stress on these buyers. So they're going to continue acting this way until either there's more inventory or until there's enough stories out there of hardship that occur from making bad judgments, because there are a lot of people doing bad. I don't know if they're bad things, but they're certainly reckless.
Mm-hmm. So I think you may disagree with me, but I think, number one, everything you said is 100% accurate. Number two, I think the agent is helping influence those reckless decisions. I think we've got too many agents right now and not enough real estate transactions to be had. They're hungry for a commission check, and they're kind of pushing their buyers to do things that they maybe shouldn't do in this market. Mm-hmm. And I think that has negatively affected things. So I don't know. Yeah,
no, I think that's true. And for me, and this is just a personal thing, and we probably don't have time to go into this, but there is a strategy out there with this thing called an escalation clause, which I know you're familiar with. Mm-hmm. And I just think that's a dangerous way to be buying houses. And I try to have my buyer's agents not use them. However, we continue to lose properties when we don't use them. Mm-hmm. So you're kind of being forced from the buyers. I have 3 or 4 buyer's agents on my team, and they feel a little bit like their hands are tied. If their buyers really want a house, they may need to go down the route of that. And I don't think that's a fair way to try to buy a house for a buyer using that clause. Totally
agree. Right now, I've mentioned this in other podcasts, the average agent has been in the business less than 5 years. So that just, I think about 70% of the agents have 5 or more years of experience. So I think we're running into, and I am anyway, running into a lot of just lack of knowledge, unprofessionalism. I mean, everybody's got to cut their teeth. Everybody's got to learn. I understand that. But what do you think needs to change in our industry in order for us to, right now I think the consumer has a very poor opinion of us in the industry. What do you think needs to change?
Well, I think we've watched what you and I combined, probably seen 6 cycles maybe in our real estate career of ups and downs. And I can tell you that every time the market gets hot for sellers, we have a ton of discount brokers, a few for sale by owners, but more discount brokers and people that are doing business in a way that I don't agree with, because they're doing anything they can to just get their sign in a yard. And what happens is, as soon as this market shifts a little bit and we get our inventory back, those people are going to disappear because they do not have a unique selling proposition. They don't understand the markets. They don't understand how to treat clients. They're just in it for the quick dollar, and they're not going to survive. And we also have the same problem, as with people that jump in part-time. Mm-hmm. So we've got a lot of people right now that are doing this because they think they're going to pick up 4, 5, 6, 8 sales a year, and all they're doing is taking sales out of our pocket. Correct. For things we've been working for 30 years, and generally speaking, their clients aren't getting the kind of treatment they deserve.
Yeah, no, I did. I wish, and I had Mike Brennan in here earlier, who's the owner of the Minnesota Real Estate School. Mm-hmm. I wish, we talked a little bit about this, that they would implement a policy. Number one, I wish they'd double our dues so that the part-timers wouldn't pay the MLS dues, board dues, things like that. They'd eliminate the bottom. And number two, I wish they'd implement have to sell a certain number of homes a year in order to be in this business. Just right. Because the only way you're going to stay on top of the trends, have an educated knowledge of a purchase agreement, of a contract, is to do a real estate transaction. If you're doing 1 or 2 of them a year, you just don't know enough about it to help a consumer the way they need to be helped.
Right. I mean, I think you and I both know you can kind of compare this to a surgeon. I mean, obviously it's a different kind of surgery, but you're not going to go to an orthopedic surgeon that's doing three surgeries a year. You want the guy that's doing 3 a week, 5 a week, whatever, that knows exactly what he's doing, and the one with the best competency. And I think right now we have, like you said, 40-50% of our industry is not super competent, and that's causing bad things to happen for the entire industry.
Yeah. If there's one thing you wish the consumer knew about this profession, I think a lot of consumers think we're a commodity. We put a sign in the yard, we put it in the MLS, and the property sells, right? And that's just how we do. We make a ton of money. We're on a TV show called $1 Million Listing, and we're lavish lifestyles. And if there's anything you wish that all consumers knew about what we do on a daily basis, what would that be?
Well, two things. Number one, that impression is wrong because as you and I know, there's about 5% of our industry that really does make a really good living and the rest struggle and struggle mightily. And that's because it is a really tough industry to get a grip on. I think what I'd like them to know is a little bit more, my partner Angela calls it front end, back end, but to understand the full workings of the front end and back end of really what goes into a transaction and dealing with a client, a title company, an appraisal, an inspector, all the different moving parts that nobody sees that we are doing in the background. That's the part that's really hard to share with consumers and draw the picture. And it's amazing how many different hats we have to wear to get through, especially in our case, a luxury transaction.
Yeah.
And I think unfortunately, I just don't think there's an appreciation for that. In addition to that, you and I think, enjoy really working our networks. And I don't think people have a grasp on how hard it is to have a luxury network and maintain it and take care of those people and make sure we don't step out of line so that we can continue to get this business, because one bad transaction can end your career.
Oh, absolutely. Reputation is everything. I mean, it's the whole, you spend a lifetime building a reputation. It can be destroyed in a minute with one bad decision, one bad transaction. Yeah, I think you made a lot of good points. I mean, the consumer we're problem solvers, right? And having 30 plus years of experience, you've been through and resolved a lot of problems. So you've got the experience to do that. And I think the real estate transactions become so complicated. Those problems have only progressed and become bigger and worse, right?
Right.
So I think the consumer just isn't aware of how many issues arise that we just deal with, and they never even really know about, because we're experienced enough to get ahead of that problem, eliminate that problem, and have them never know about the problem, so the road or the path is smooth for them, right?
Right.
Yeah. So I think that's a great point. What's one thing that you tell a buyer or a seller in this market right now? Maybe both. Maybe there's two different things, right? Just if there's one piece of advice you'd give anybody, whether they do business with you or they do business with any real estate professional out there, what piece of advice would you give a buyer and B, a seller?
Well, I think with a seller, I think I really spend. I'm interviewing for a couple properties right now on White Bear Lake where I like to work, and they do know 4 or 5 agents, and they're telling me who they know and why they know them. And I said, what I think is going to be the deciding factor for you is who can navigate. In the case of several of these people, they have wells, they have septics, they are non-compliant, there are issues around their house and buried tanks, oil tanks, you name it, and we have all kinds of things that the other agents you're talking to are not going to understand. They don't have the contacts in the toolbox to get these things figured out. That's where I'm going to make a big difference. In addition to the fact that we think we do a better job pre-marketing these properties than anybody in the industry, and we think we have the network to likely get you 5 to 7 offers in this kind of market. And so that's what I share with the sellers. And then, Angela, who handles my time, she handles all the deadlines, timelines, checklists. She does such a great job at getting them ready for turbulence and explaining to them what kinds of turbulence they might encounter. There are no surprises with us. And that's what I love, is just the way we lay it out. We get them ready for those things. We talk about the appraisal and the fact that it could come in low, and we go through all that. And it's really easy for the sellers, and it's fun. With the buyers, whole different deal. I think the only advice I have for buyers, and I'm working with 3 first-time buyers right now, all looking. Interesting thing on the first-time buyers, I don't know if you've noticed this, but because of the dual income, they're shopping in the 600s. I kind of thought a first-time homebuyer house was 200s, but apparently it's now 600s. Yeah. Anyways, the long and short of that is I'm telling them now, don't get hung up on the outcome, because in real estate, my honest belief is that everything happens for a reason. So if you don't get this particular house, there's another great one around the corner, and there's a reason this happened to you and somebody else got that house. Yeah. And I think that's the only way you can face it. Otherwise, they get so disappointed with this market and the way people are acting in this market. Totally agree with that. On the buy side, I had the same conversations with my buyers. If it's meant to be, it will be. All you can do is put your best foot forward and take the least amount of risk possible, and allow me to kind of be the logic part of your decision. We always talk about the emotion and the logic, right? Don't let emotion
take over. Let's put some logic in this decision and make sure that we make a good logical decision. And on the sell side, to your point, you brought up, you're that agent that you think can get 5 to 7 offers for your client. Then it's navigating through those 5 to 7 offers to determine if they're all the same price, which one's the strongest offer and going to have the least amount of problems throughout the process, whether that's appraisal problems or whatever.
And you know this better than anybody, Wade. The key to that is we lay out these spreadsheets with 7 to 8, 10, 12 offers, and then we are going down. The first thing we're looking at besides the offer price is who the agent is on the other side. Because if it's a great agent that knows how to get deals closed and has solid buyers and a solid background, that's an agent I want to work with. And when there are 3, 4, 5 part-time agents on the other side of a transaction, I explain that to my clients because that's an important part of the decision-making process.
Totally agree. And in fact, I've encouraged my sellers at times to counter-offer the good agent's offer, to see where even in the highest and best situation, right? Because we know that agent can navigate that obstacle.
The process.
Yeah. So, what do you think? You've been in this long enough. What do you think this economy is going to bring? What do you think the housing market's going to look like 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now? I just sat down with one of the largest builders here in the East Metro. His experience and his knowledge tells him that we're 5 years plus of getting through this low inventory shortage, maybe more closer to a decade of building through this, because those builders stopped building homes right after the recession, right? So we've got to make up for that. So what's your 2 cents on where you think things will go when people ask you that question? I know it's kind of the crystal ball question.
Well, I think the economy right now is very perplexing because in my mind, nothing should be going up. And yet everything's going up. We know there's inflation occurring, which obviously is going to affect our first-time buyers, and maybe that'll slow down the market a little bit with some interest rate adjustments. I'm not sure, but what I don't get is everybody over 50, I'm in that category, everybody who can afford to get out of Minnesota that's over 50, our government's done a really good job of scaring people out of our state. And it's ridiculous how foolish they are. They're losing all kinds of money. Everybody's moving to Florida, Nashville. You mentioned Nashville a little bit ago. There's a bunch of places people are trying to get to. Austin, Arizona. Those are where my clients are going. And I'd like to go with them. So I don't know how quickly I can get out of here. But 5 years from now, I hope I'm having this interview with you in Scottsdale.
Yeah. I had a transaction recently in the Stillwater area. They moved solely, and they were a younger family with 4 kids. They moved solely because of political reasons and how this state's being run, and they went west, and I can't remember which state, but that's the only reason they sold. And they could work from home, and they could go anywhere they wanted to, and they picked a state that was a little bit less. And to
piggyback on that, I think it's important too now for buyers to really do their research on the backgrounds of the school districts they're searching. I think there's a lot of school board things going on right now that some are comfortable with, some are uncomfortable with, but unless you understand the school district really well, you need to make sure that you have your school decisions figured out. And that could be private, it could be a magnet school, a charter school. I think a lot of those schools are going to continue to get speed and power, and I think that's going to be the new thing, is a lot of people are going to do other things for schooling. That's what I see. Unless something dramatically changes in this state, I think they're going to scare the old people away because they want a better tax situation. And I think the schools are doing a pretty good job of shooting themselves in the foot right now.
I'm seeing a push towards private school. A lot of my families have moved into private schools for various reasons, but I've seen a big push for that. So absolutely. Do you have kids that work with you in the business?
I do not. I have 2 sons, and one's a sophomore in college at Michigan, and one is a sophomore at Matamidi High School.
Do you think either of them will follow your footsteps in the business?
I do not have an interest in them following me. How's that sound?
You're a lot like me, Eric. I've kindly discouraged my kids from getting in the business, right? Look, real estate's been great to me. It's been a fantastic career for me. It's been a place where I've thrived. I like to think I'm good at it, and it's something that I've enjoyed. But you're right. I think the way the business is going, I'm going to encourage my kids to find a different career path.
Fortunately, my wife has done an amazing job with these 2 young lads, and I think both of them are way too smart to ever do what I'm doing. And so they're going to do something far more interesting, and I'm excited to see what that is.
Same. Well, I appreciate you coming in. I appreciate this insight, this conversation. Is there anything else that you would like to just share with the consumer right now that's happening in the real estate industry that you think is just not a good thing? Kind of get behind the curtain and say, look, you need to be aware of this.
Well, I think it's important for them to really dig deep when they're interviewing prospective agents to work with, because I think what I've seen, at least in the last 5 years, is there's several, I don't know if I would call them decent agents that have decided to chase the proverbial shiny object. And so they've gone to some sort of a dramatic discount program or a company that's trying to buy inventory. And I mean, that's going to crash, and it's going to come back on them. But at this point, I think as a seller, if you're falling for that, there's a reason they're doing that. It's because they're not spending money, they're not doing the same marketing, the same advertising, and the same things that we do to make sure we get you multiple offers and get you a higher selling price. And I just think you got to do your research in this market.
I think that's great advice. And I don't know what you're seeing, but we both, I know, specialize in the upper bracket. I've always said to to my team and to that consumer, those folks are savvy and they're willing to invest in a good professional because they lean on the best attorneys, they lean on the best CPAs to guide them through decisions that are best for them, and that's how they've made the wealth that they've made, right? So I've never run into that obstacle. I shouldn't say never. I rarely run into that obstacle in the upper bracket because those consumers understand the value we bring to the transaction. I don't know if you can elaborate on that, but
well, I think that's a huge point. I had an interview the other day, and the gentleman was handling an estate for his family. And he said, well, I'm talking to 3 other agents, but one of them won't be back for a month. She's in Naples. And I said, well, that's really the agent. Like that's what we're talking about. You and I are here. We're digging in every day. We're getting it done. Yes, we'll take an occasional vacation. But I think you need to work with somebody that knows not only how to navigate this market, but also knows all the ins and outs. And I think, like you said, I think people are still willing to pay for value. And I think in this market, there's only, there's a shrinking number of us out there, but there are still some really good agents in the Twin Cities, especially on the northeast side of town.
Yeah, I think the gap has gotten greater. You say if there's 5% of the agents, I think it's almost less than 2% of the agents that are really starting to separate themselves from kind of that crowd of just of average, right? I think there's a big separation between good and great. So along those lines, I always like to wrap up this conversation with one thing that's totally different than what we've been talking about. But if you were to sit down with your kids, if you were to talk to any of your agents and just give them one piece of just advice on success, what would that be? You're a really successful person, or I wouldn't have invited you in, but what would that be?
The thing that still intrigues me about education in America is that they don't teach kids about money. And I still think that's just a huge flaw in our schooling system. So, I started with my kids a few years back, and we opened up a couple accounts, and they each picked a few stocks, and then we tracked the stocks and kind of went through that just to watch a little $500 account get to $1,500 so they could get an idea for how that works. And now they're both like crazy about finance. They want to learn more about it. They want to understand it better. They love hearing about all these tech companies and trying to figure out why they're growing. I think it's important to get our kids more engaged in that and figure out, really teach them the power of a dollar and compounding and all these simple things. And, and then for me, I think that one thing I am seeing that I kind of like is I think there's a little bit more of a push now to get kids to kind of focus on what they want to do than automatically pushing them to college. And I just think there's I've seen so many younger people that have done great with HVAC and plumbing and all these different industries. And I would love to see more people get into that if that's their passion, rather than doing what mom and dad say, which is go to college. I mean, college is great, and if it's for you, I think it's a blessing and a wonderful thing. But I think there's plenty of opportunities out there that can feed a child.
Yeah, life skills and follow your passion, I think, are 2 really important things. So, well, thanks for being here. I appreciate your time. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, and I'll put some contact information below, and people can reach out to you.
It was a fun conversation. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Raw Real Estate Podcast. If you have any feedback for this episode or want to suggest a future topic or even possible guests, head to wadehansen.com. There you can get links to my Facebook and LinkedIn pages. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel to see the video version of this podcast too. Again, thank you for listening to the Raw Real Estate Podcast. We'll talk soon.